Have you ever felt like you're your own worst critic? Caught in this constant loop of self-analysis and self-doubt? Well, today we are diving deep into what's known as the neurotic personality. We're going to explore the intense inner world that defines it, trace its often surprising origins, and really try to understand what's going on inside.
So let me ask you this. Does this sound familiar? You have this almost superpower level ability to analyze yourself, right? You can break down your own motivations and actions with incredible detail, but somehow all of that brilliant self-awareness only seems to lead to one conclusion, that you're just not good enough. This right here is the central paradox of the neurotic personality, and we're going to unpack it together.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by really painting a picture of the neurotic's inner world. Then we'll get into the surprising origins, what I call the good family paradox. We'll see how this all plays out in relationships, and then, most importantly, we'll look at the first steps you can take to start rewriting that internal script.
Okay, so let's step inside the neurotic's inner world. What does it actually feel like to live there day in and day out? Well, at its core, it's an experience that's defined by two fundamental and frankly utterly exhausting internal battles that just color every single aspect of life.
You can think of it like this. Neuroticism is this really strange paradox. You've got this powerful analytical mind that is constantly turned inward, right? It's examining every thought, every feeling, every action. But instead of all that brain power leading to confidence, it's like it gets weaponized against yourself, just fueling this relentless internal storm of self-doubt and inadequacy.
So this brings us to that first huge internal conflict. On one side of this giant canyon, you have the ideal self. This is the perfect, confident, successful version of who you feel you should be. And way over on the other side, there's your real self, the person you see as deeply flawed, totally insecure, and always falling short. That gap between them, it feels like an impossible chasm, and it's a constant painful reminder of how you're just not measuring up.
And the second core conflict, it's this relentless tug-of-war, a constant battle between what I want and what I should do. Life becomes this endless series of obligations and duties, all the things you feel you must do to be a good, acceptable person. And in the meantime, your own authentic desires, your passions, they get pushed down, suppressed, and often dismissed as being selfish or maybe even wrong.
Now, living with these two huge conflicts creates a very specific and very draining emotional landscape. You're just burdened by this overdeveloped sense of responsibility for everything and everyone, which then feeds in your constant feeling of guilt. Anger becomes this forbidden emotion. You feel like you can't express it freely, so it just gets buried deep down, which can make you seem timid or overly modest to others. And all of this is held up by a deep-seated fear of rejection and an inability to ever truly let your guard down and relax, which can cause real problems, especially in moments of intimacy.
So, the million-dollar question is, where does all this inner turmoil come from? You'd probably expect a story of a really harsh or neglectful childhood, right? But the source of neuroticism is often found in the complete opposite environment. Let's dig into this really surprising paradox.
So here's the big twist. Neuroticism often isn't born from obvious trauma or neglect, but in a very good family. I'm talking about loving, well-intentioned parents who were deeply committed to raising you right. The problem wasn't a lack of care. It was maybe an over-focus on raising you properly, on shaping you into the perfect good boy or good girl.
And this proper upbringing tends to follow a specific recipe. First, there's a subtle but constant criticism. This feeling that you're a project that needs to be fixed or improved. It's that parent who says, "Oh, I love that painting, honey, but it would be perfect if you just fixed this one little corner." Then there's overprotection. You're kept in this fragile little greenhouse, shielded from life's hard knocks, so you learn that you can't really handle things on your own. A huge rule in the house is the suppression of emotion. You're taught that anger is bad and totally unacceptable. And finally, guilt is used as a tool to make sure you behave, making you feel responsible for your parents' happiness or disappointment.
Okay, here's a really powerful test for this. As an adult, right now, could you go to your parents and tell them absolutely anything? And I mean anything. Could you say, "Hey, I'm quitting my stable job to go travel for 2 years," or "I'm getting a divorce and I've realized I actually don't want kids," or even something like, "I had a same-sex experience I want to talk about." If your gut feeling is that their reaction would be to moralize, to shame you, to criticize, or to just express deep disappointment, well, that's a really strong indicator of this dynamic we're talking about. As you can imagine, these deep-seated patterns don't just magically disappear when we become adults. Of course not. They become the blueprint for our closest relationships, especially when it comes to love.
So in our adult relationships, this childhood blueprint often leads to 3 really painful patterns. First, you might find yourself repeating the script because constant criticism feels familiar. It almost feels like home. You unconsciously seek out partners who are also critical or neglectful. Or, second, if you do find a genuinely kind and loving partner, you might self-sabotage. You push them away because deep down, you feel so unworthy of that kind of unconditional love. And third, you might end up with a really domineering partner because you're completely unable to assert yourself or fight back since you were taught from day one that your anger is invalid.
And what about your relationship with your parents today? It's likely still a huge tangle of emotions. You love them, of course. You probably feel pity for them. Maybe you even find yourself making excuses for them. But underneath all that, there's often this quiet, deep resentment for not being fully seen or accepted for who you are. A sadness that you just can't be as free with them as you are with your closest friends.
But here's the good news, and it is good news. This internal script can be rewritten. Now, it's not easy, not at all, but just understanding the pattern is the crucial first step toward creating a new one.
So, the path to change really starts with honestly analyzing the past, really understanding your personal history with your parents and seeing exactly how it's replaying in your life today. From there, the really crucial work begins, reclaiming the emotions you were taught to suppress, especially anger. This doesn't mean becoming an angry person. It means learning to express it in a healthy, constructive way instead of letting it turn into sadness or depression. This reclaimed energy is the fuel you need to build assertiveness, the ability to set firm boundaries, to say no, and to actually prioritize your own needs without that familiar wave of guilt washing over you.
Now, it's really important to be realistic here. Trying to make these deep emotional changes all by yourself is incredibly difficult. And why is that? It's because you're trying to break a pattern you learned before you could even talk. You need a new model. This is where a skilled therapist, or even just one person in your life who offers you total, unconditional love and acceptance, becomes invaluable. They provide the psychological safety net you need to finally learn a new way of being in the world.
And before we wrap this all up, it's so important to remember that these are just frameworks for understanding. They're not rigid boxes to put ourselves or other people into.
You know, real life is always way more complex than any one label can capture. Most of us exist somewhere in a middle ground, on a spectrum. And navigating all this is made even harder because our culture often lacks clear, healthy role models. It's really difficult to find public examples of people who successfully blend strength with emotional vulnerability or ambition with true kindness. Without those templates, it can be hard to even know what you're aiming for.
So I'll leave you with this one question to think about. Think about that internal battle we talked about, the one between should and want. What is the one should in your life right now, that obligation, that duty, that you most want to transform into a genuine, authentic want? If this exploration of the inner world was valuable to you, or if any of it rang true, please take a moment to like this and subscribe to the channel. And we would absolutely love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Sharing our experiences really does help us all feel a little less alone in these complex struggles. Your support helps this information reach others who might be out there trying to understand their own story. Thank you so much for joining.